Sometimes games are fun, and sometimes they're hard. That's just the way it is. But sometimes a game manages to strike a good balance between the two. It takes a fine balance to pull off being both in a way that will actually result in a rewarding and long-lasting experience for a player. One of the best methods to make a tough yet rewarding experience is to make a fair game with mechanical depth. Games that challenge a player's logical reflexes and logical responses. Games that, if a player wants to succeed, will require them to do a lot of learning up front. The problem with these games is that learning them can sometimes be a grueling and soul-crushing experience. Today we're going to look at some of the games I've played throughout the years where I felt the crippling blow of a steep learning curve. Whether because the game was actually tough to learn, or because I just didn't have that much experience with the genre yet. This video was suggested by Patreon, though they specifically asked for a JRPG focus. If you want a video like this just on JRPGs, check out Shadow Elite's channel after this. He just done one a short while ago, and I'm not aiming to make a video too similar to his. I don't particularly need the wrath of the JRPG god to come down on me.
Don't tase me, bro!
That said, JRPGs will of course make their appearance. This list will also exclude games that just have steep difficulty curves rather than steep learning curves. Games like Ikaruga, The Impossible Game, or God forbid, Cat Mario. With that, let's get started. Dark Souls. What better game to start with than the world's first ever difficult video game? My first time playing this was an embarrassment. Looking at it now, it honestly seems kind of simple to understand, and the game doesn't even feel that hard anymore. But isn't that how it always goes with most games with steep learning curves? Once you understand how the game works, they kinda even out. When I first bought this game, I booted it up. I struggled my way through the tutorial, getting more and more frustrated with every loss, and every orange message I read on the ground added to my frustration as I was finding it impossible to make sense of any of them. I thought the tutorial was garbage. I thought the game was unfair and the controls were cumbersome. The first time I stepped into Firelink Shrine, I read an orange sign on the ground that said, "Praise the sun," and I literally asked myself while scrolling through menus, how the fuck do you praise the sun? I cursed at the game, claiming that this is horseshit. The game doesn't tell you anything. Where is the praise the sun button? I legitimately rage quit after that. I took some downtime to relax and play Dead Space 2, and then came back to Dark Souls later. On my second go around, I read a 10 things to know before playing Dark Souls article, and found that it helped, at least to a degree. For about 60 hours, I played with a heavy roll, not realizing that my weight actually played a role in my mobility. The learning curve in Dark Souls comes in a few places. Learning to control your emotions and approach the world with measured responses and understanding, and learning how to level your character to pursue useful builds. Controlling the game, or rather learning its controls, isn't exactly that hard, but the nuance required to use the controls and to navigate the world with reason only comes with time and dedication. It took a bit for stats and leveling to fully sink in for me, and of course much of the game is incredibly cryptic, but the more it clicked, the more I fell in love. I managed to clear the game a few times back to back on Xbox 360, until I eventually got stuck at soul level 222 in New Game plus against the Four Kings. Sticking with the dark theme here, we got Dark Cloud 1. Back when I was younger and dumber, this whole genre was pretty new to me. I remember a lot of talk going around school at the time about how this game actually required you to keep your characters hydrated if you wanted to survive. As you explore dungeons and go deeper and deeper, your characters will slowly begin to need water. Water was a tough find in some dungeons, and these dungeons could be incredibly large. If you don't find any water in time, you'd often find yourself having to start the dungeon over entirely. Making sure that this new survival-oriented mechanic in my action RPG was kept in check was tough to adjust to. If you do make it out of the dungeon alive, you'll find your job is only just beginning. Some of the loot recovered in dungeons can be used to build and expand a city that you start from scratch. All of a sudden, your survival action RPG game also becomes a tycoon simulator. It also shifted how I approach leveling, as you don't really level up your characters. More so, your weapons level up through kills. However, weapons also have durability, something that to me at the time was new. This could threaten to undo much of your progress if left unattended to. Now, this game may have come more naturally to me had I ever played a game like ActRaiser before, but needless to say, I hadn't. And though I love this title, it came as anything but easy. I just hadn't been prepared for many of its mechanics yet. This one will always hold a special place in my heart. Late night staying up with my buddy playing this on rental, hoping to see it through to the end. Not to mention my shock and amazement when Dark Cloud 2 finally released. It was a completely different game, but entirely incredible. To this day, I still consider it to be one of the best RPGs on the PlayStation 2, and one of my favorite art styles on the system as well. If the RPG gods exist out there somewhere, please, I'm begging you, give us a Dark Cloud 3 already. And maybe take back Resonance of Fate. Screw this game. I mean, it's not like it's bad, it just didn't click for me. I liked the characters and the comedy, the story didn't seem horrible, and the sets looked amazing, but man, this combat? I just couldn't get into it. In a way, it works a little bit like the Caligula effect does, where you need to set up moves for your characters to work better in sync with each other. This mostly happens by positioning your characters to each other in ways that creates movement patterns around the enemies. When a character goes in for an attack, other characters contained within the movement pattern will get to chain off their attack. While in motion, you select which enemy you're firing on, though you need to strategize here as well, as certain characters and ammo types will drain enemy shield meters far more effectively than others. The whole thing is designed to look flashy and like an action movie, but to be honest, I find the camera work and excessive choreography just makes it harder to understand what I'm looking at. Add on top of this that some moves require charge times, and that charge times vary depending on enemy proximity. Also add on that different types of damage don't become effective until activated by another type of damage, and man, I just don't know, it feels almost senseless to me. At one point in time I learned this battle system, but it was more like memorizing a math equation than it was like actually understanding one. I didn't like the rules of this system, and so it never really felt fun to me. Some people swear by this game, and maybe if I could get past my issues with the combat, I would too, but half the time, I feel like I just don't know what I'm looking at. I'm just throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. Project Diva F. Actually, you know what, this one's probably not got a steep learning curve. The instructions are pretty clear, it's just a massive assault on the senses to me and I can't usually keep up. Still love it though. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. My first Monster Hunter experience that wasn't just messing around a bit on a buddy's PSP in high school. Who here remembers trying to learn these games before World came out? They do not tell you how to do much at all going in. Hell, when I first started this, I was sure I was just gonna solo the whole game. That was a big nope. After 24 hours and still not being able to get past the Kurapeko, I finally caved and went online. Monster Hunter is all about the grind and jolly cooperation. It's all about killing weak monsters, harvesting their organs, and turning them into weapons, only to kill that same monster again with a weapon that you built out of its dead relatives.
Now that's edgy.
If you're a real badass, you'll build a weapon out of small creatures, and then use that weapon to kill its parents. The challenge here isn't doing this alone, though that is certainly a challenge, but learning what all of your items are and just how damn valuable they are. Once you learn that something like a sonic boom or a flash grenade can stun an enemy, the game's difficulty may level out a bit, but then you'll find out how quickly you burn through items that you think are useful. Then you'll need to learn how to craft them. When you become too reliant on items, you may find that you're filling your inventory with them, and not leaving yourself enough space to salvage new materials with. You'll also come to find that these items probably aren't going far enough for you anyway. So then you need to learn your item management, and maybe bring a selection of ingredients to craft with on the field, meaning you need a pretty decent understanding of crafting recipes. And let's not forget cooking rations either. Sure, this is easy. You just time it to the music and watch closely.
So tasty!
But before you knew that, this was the real final boss of Monster Hunter. So many burnt rations. In the end though, Monster Hunter's difficulty comes from an almost sandbox approach to items and weapon types. The games basically give you everything at once, and they don't tell you much about them. It's up to you to go through the effort of trying everything until you discover a style that fits you, and a style that maims the enemy you're going against. Given the sheer volume of stuff to experiment with, it can take a long time to find your groove in Monster Hunter. Now, I'm only going to pick one tactics game for this video. It would be easy to go with one of the first of the genre I've ever played, like Final Fantasy Tactics, since your first experience with the genre is almost always where you feel the learning curve the strongest. Or we could go with Disgaea. That one might actually have the hardest learning curve for a tactics RPG. However, y'all degenerates need more Phantom Brave in your life. It is so unfair that this gem always gets swept under the rug. It's a lot like many other tactics games, but battle has a unique mechanic that at times is hard to wrap your head around, and at other times just really hard to figure out how to use in a beneficial way. To get new characters into battle, you need to confine them into the objects scattered throughout the arena. However, every object has its own stats, and these stats will modify the stats of the character that you're confining to it, causing various buffs, debuffs, and stat increases and decreases. It's not enough to just spec your team well. You need to summon them into battle by confining them to agreeable items. These items, though, can also serve as weapons for you if you choose to pick them up, so confining new characters to them isn't always the best idea. You'll also find times, however, when an item you might want to use as a weapon is in danger of getting picked up by an enemy and used against you. In these moments, you need to gamble. Confine a person into that object to prevent the enemy from getting at it, or pray to RNGesus that you can get to it before the enemy does. Add on top of this that the game is already hard as nails in some places, and this new mechanic pushes it to something that can really crush you before you can fully learn how to utilize it. This gets me to thinking though, if I was ever confined into a new world, what item would I be confined into? Knowing my luck, it'd probably be somebody's old body pillow. One that's old enough that it probably stands up on its own.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Labyrinth of Refrain. It'd be easy to go with a Shin Megami Tensei game or something, but those have the spotlight enough as it is. Labyrinth of Refrain is a real mind-boggler to get down. For the most part, the difficulty comes in just building your party. I went in depth on this in a review once, and if you want to know more, feel free to check it out. But in short, your battle party is made up of covens. Covens are like little groups. Each group has a few leaders that you put into these slots, and it also has support members that you put into these slots. Each slot has effects that can affect characters in that slot or in different slots, sometimes negatively, sometimes positively. Finding a way to build a team where you can bring a lot of people into battle and they're all at peak performance and they all still get experience for taking part in battle is nearly impossible. This really is a game of choosing which arm or leg you think won't be useful in the next battle and cutting it off. Only spoiler alert, all of your limbs are useful. When you start using the larger covens, which allow your max party size to be around 40 people, you may find the need to bust out a calculator and a spreadsheet to get your build in order. And did I mention you build your characters yourself? And that they also have a large system in play that modifies their stats in numerous ways before they even make it into a coven? Well, there's a lot more I could say, but just check the review if you're looking for something to hurt your brain on. It's a pretty fun game. Vagrant Story. This is one I covered in the past as well and absolutely adore. I also talk about it any chance I get. If you own this game, I recommend you read the manual, as the game itself will not tell you nearly enough. In most RPGs, you have spells that deal buffs and debuffs, and you usually only have to use them in a pinch. But in Vagrant Story, every battle is a pinch. Not only do you need to start battle with buffs and debuffs, but you also need to study the enemy, identify their weaknesses, and equip the right weapons, gems, and accessories before you can even dream of doing damage. Once attacks start, every time you attack the enemy, your risk counter goes up. The higher your risk counter goes up, the more prone you become to missing, so battles are encouraged to be done and over with quickly. However, there's another mechanic here that will almost guarantee battles will not be over that fast. Your weapon has a power meter that you gradually drain. The lower that meter gets, the less your damage output becomes until you're regularly doing 1 or 0 damage per hit. And that's of course only considering you were doing more to begin with. At times you'll find you also need to train your weapons to be stronger against certain enemies by killing more of those exact enemies with that weapon. Some mechanics in this game actively work against each other, but other mechanics are in place to undermine or circumvent this. Learning what those mechanics are and how to use them is the tough part, and it's why I made a whole video explaining just the battle mechanics of this old gem. Vagrant Story is obtuse at times, but it's an awesome game. It's just in desperate need of some modern age quality of life improvements. Divinity Original Sin, probably one of the best non-Dungeons & Dragons realizations of the Dungeons & Dragons battle formula. This is probably my second favorite game on this list, second only to the original Dark Souls. It's also a great co-op experience. Divinity Original Sin has a lot of common sense mechanics that are just easy to not keep track of. The way elements play together and how your environment can become your biggest enemy or your best advantage is a sure sight to behold. Taking the chess approach of always being 2 steps ahead is highly recommended, though most good strategies will require you to be thinking 4 to 5 steps ahead instead. I won't dig too deep into this, but there's a certain magic when you get your party working in sync with each other. Maybe use one character to cast a move that'll freeze a group of enemies in place. Then somebody else will douse them in oil, and then the third person will set that oil aflame to deal massive damage to all of the enemies. Just hope that those enemies aren't made of poison, or they may explode when brought into contact with the flames and deal some AoE damage to your party members. It is easy to do awesome stuff as a party, but you won't realize it right away. And for the first half of the game, every time you try to do something awesome, you'll likely end up noticing a detail you overlooked just a little bit too late, and your whole plan will just explode in your face. And to finish this video off, let's come full circle. We started by talking about the first ever hard game, so let's talk about the last one. Sakura, or Sakura, or however you pronounce it. Holy crap, did this game ever start a discourse. Sakura is hard as nails. As a Souls vet, and probably because I'm a Souls vet, I found this game insanely difficult. The tough part of the learning curve comes from the fact that you're given several methods to counter enemy attacks, and which method you use for which type of attack will determine whether or not you get your shit kicked in. If an enemy stabs at you, go for the Mikiri counter. If an enemy takes a whirling slash, jump on his head Mario style. If an enemy is just going ham, mash the block button and deflect his attacks. If a grab is incoming, back the hell away with a quick dash. Don't forget to make time to hold up, block, and recover your posture either, though good luck finding time for that. The thing is, combat is so fast that most moves are telegraphed for the briefest and hardest to interpret of moments. Often, even when you know what to do, your realization will come just a little too late, and you'll just mash the wrong button. If you are coming from the perspective of a Souls fan, your biggest hurdle will be unlearning how to approach this like a Souls game. You can't just bum rush the enemies. Though they can kill you in 2 hits, you certainly can't do the same to them. Using the previous talked about counterattacks, you'll gradually break enemies' posture. When they are posture broken, you get the chance to deal a heavy blow that will drain at least 1 of their often many health meters. This causes combat to be more about breaking enemy posture by deflecting and going in for a single powerful attack. If you aim for just a bunch of little ones on a non-posture broken enemy, you're going to learn fast how bad of an idea that is, and you will not make it very far. Keeping up with Sakura, mastering its counters, and learning to not approach this as a beat the enemy to death with your sword kind of game is a grueling yet very rewarding experience. Though it's a lesson that comes very hard learned, and one I've seen many people give up on before it fully sank in. Many people were even able to identify what they were doing wrong, but not break old habits and just adjust to it. That all said, the game kinda runs like garbage, and it does suffer some artificial difficulty with some enemies that can literally see through walls and attack through them. That stuff is bullshit and it needs to be fixed. And though I liked this, I do find myself more of a fan of the weightier combat in these Souls games, and I probably won't keep up with this if it ever becomes a series. At least not in a day one purchase kind of way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, were just some of the games I struggled to wrap my head around throughout the ages. Sometimes these games seem unfair and crushing at first, though often that's just the experience of learning a tough lesson. Oftentimes, once you understand the mechanics, the difficulty in these games largely vanish, though that isn't always the case either. With Vagrant Story, for example, you can manipulate the mechanics to literally make yourself invincible for the final fight, though doing so requires a very good understanding of the game's rules. An understanding that comes tough to learn. Other games like Monster Hunter or the Soul series just become insanely rewarding and addictive. Once you learn the mechanics, the challenge just becomes about being better as a player, and overcoming the difficulty curve rather than the learning curve. Honing your skills more than honing your understanding, or rather applying your skill set to your newfound understanding. Truly, this has resulted in some of the most fun I've ever had with a video game. But this is a fun that I never would have experienced if I gave up simply because I couldn't find the praise the sun button. So next time you find yourself struggling through a game that you think should, by all means, appeal to you, at least ask yourself if you gave an honest shot of learning it, and then actually, truly adjusting your playing to your understanding. If not, then persevere just a little bit longer, and see if you can break through that wall, and claim the rewards that lie just on the other side. Because more often than not, they are worth it. And that's all for today, folks. As always, thanks for watching. Oh, also like, comment, subscribe, all that. See ya!
Now that's edgy.